Hello out there, anybody who decides to watch this. I'm just a race fan who has been watching NASCAR for 30 years. As you see behind me, I've got tons of diecasts in my office. This is only a third of it, but I grew up near Bristol. My family is from Bristol, and then we moved to Fredericksburg, and from there, I attended Richmond races on a twice annual basis for a long time, in addition to the Bristol races and sometimes some other ones. Been to Dover and Charlotte. Uh, I've been Homestead in 2018 for the championship weekend. Uh, been to Atlanta before it was repaved. Um, so I've been to a variety of tracks, Pocono several times when I was stationed in Maryland for the Navy. And the sport I love has continued to devolve and spiral into this place today where, as we saw last night in Martinsville, the credibility and the integrity we see racing is just today. The situations that NASCAR has put these guys in, that they have forced the drivers to behave in ways with the etiquette they have, that they think is creating these great Game 7 moments. But if you're a purist or even just a semi pure race fan, it just makes you throw your hands up in the air and go, what the hell? Why do I even bother tuning in every week? I remember growing up, obviously this is 30 years ago, you would make it a point after church to be home. Like the Daytona 500 was church, on a Sunday in the early spring and February. Racing was religion. You had to be willed these tickets in Bristol because the racing was so good. And you fast forward 3 decades now forward from my childhood, and I'm in my early 40s, and what I see on TV, I don't like. I really don't like it with this car. It has moments of greatness, but for the most part, as a fan, I don't like that everything feels, not just looks, but feels so manufactured and looks manufactured as a race fan. And I'm very curious. I'm leaving the comments open when I post this. For everybody to give their 2 cents. I think Sunday very much showcased the good and the bad of the situation we're in today. Goodyear has finally brought a fantastic tire. Short track racing with the next gen has been absolute garbage. The only two times we've had good races on the short track have either been Bristol in the spring, when the tire was disintegrating, not wearing, just flat out coming apart at a high rate, or this weekend at Martinsville where the tire was super gummy. You could see the debris in the marbles, but it wasn't like we had a bunch of blown tires or you had to pit every 30, 40 laps. No, instead it really laid down rubber. The track turned black. The right sides of the cars turned black because the camber was so high in the wheel well on the right side. So you could really see that, I applaud Goodyear on this weekend because that tire is where we've needed to go. Have gotten to the point where, like many fans, I feel like leading up through the mid 2000s, through the COT days where you could bump into each other, and then back to the Gen 6 days, the short tracks were the bread and butter. So much to like every other fan, we were clamoring for more of them. And then we got to this COT or the next gen, and I mean it's a beautiful looking race car, no doubt about it. But it's also an awful looking race car when you think about what it takes to make a good NASCAR race car. The tires, as many as have said, as a fan, when I've watched it, are way too damn wide. In turn, you put way too much traction on the ground. And you saw it yesterday with Blaney trying to move Brad Keselowski when he had a fast car. He couldn't do it. Why couldn't he do it? Because there's too much grip on the ground. So he couldn't get under him and move him up. Brad is a skillful driver. First off, he's won at Martinsville before. Fantastic performance put on by him. And then Blaney, eventually wore his tires out trying to get by him. And then when he got another run at it, this time he got a little bit more aggressive. Eventually made his way through. Now the people he was racing, he had better tires than by a good margin. In Chase Elliott, Larson, Hamlin, etc. So that did make a difference. But the race itself, overall yesterday was fantastic. I voted yes in the good race poll because I thought everything up until the last 10 laps, the 10 laps in retrospect, not the 10 laps live in real time, watching that battle evolve between Blaney and Chase and Larson and everyone was just really good. Getting to watch them, who's gonna, whose tires were gonna wear out first, what was gonna happen, and how that was gonna play out. Would we get a late race caution? If so, who was gonna pit? How much wear was on their tires? How much did Blaney use up his tires? There were so many good storylines yesterday. And then we get to the end of the race, and as I'm watching it wind down in real time, everybody can see plainly that the Chevy drivers are blocking for Byron. They're not trying to pass him. And if you look in my office, that's all HMS. That's Jeff Gordon right there. Over here is Byron and Bowman. And so I'm Team HMS. But at the same time, Byron didn't deserve to be in the Final Four. If those guys didn't block for him, he's out. And then what they did for him ultimately results, in my opinion, in what happens with the 20 and Bell. So again, without one, you don't have the other. And so now we're in this place where the integrity of the sport is severely in question. I mean, I watched the press conference last night. Elton Sawyer, I think, looked like a colossal idiot, personally. I could say meaner things, but that's just not how adults behave, but I think he looked like an idiot. You come on there, you say that it took you guys 27 minutes to deliberate and decide whether or not what Bell did was considered legal or not. You guys took 27 minutes to do that, yet you also openly admit that at no point in time did you take into consideration the blatant race manipulation that was done by both Chevy and TRD. And ultimately, all I did was I felt like in 2013 when I left Richmond with my uncle. We had been there. I watched as, Martin Truex secured the spot. I was hoping Gordon would get in. He didn't get in. Not knowing about anything with Spingate leaving that night. And as we're listening to the radio on the ride home and you're learning about the disqualifications and then everything that comes later in that week, I just felt like after that race last night in Martinsville that I feel like I did when I was in Richmond in 2013. And before you say they're not the same, I mean, race manipulation is race manipulation, period. And there's a difference between working together on a plate race until the final laps versus actively not racing, which is what those guys were doing yesterday. Chastain, Dillon, Hocevar for the first time all race wasn't running people over, really. They were actively blocking them. I honestly expected Keselowski to ship one of them into the other if he could. I just think his tires were too used up at that point to do it, or he probably would have. And I was kind of hoping he would, because that's what should happen. So, afterwards I talked to my buddy. He's a Larson fan. And even he and I both agreed, even though we were rooting for the guy with the most wins to get in, we agreed he didn't deserve to be there. He's not the guy who deserved to be there after last night's performance. But that being said, in totality of the season, you also have the 4 guys you have out all have more wins than the guys that you have in. There's 10 race wins among the 4 people that were eliminated. You don't have 10 race wins among the 4 people that are in for the entire season, which is pretty crazy. Then on top of it, not one of those folks, other than Reddick, who won the regular season championship, because Larson missed a race for the 600, so self-inflicted, have a number 1 stat to their name anywhere in terms of statistics for the season. So, this is genuinely the first time in the win you're in Final Four system. I absolutely feel like it's a mockery of who's best. The next closest year was 2020 when Chase Elliott won the championship, while Kevin Harvick had either 9 or 10 wins. I got a cabinet over there with all of them in there. And Denny Hamlin and him went toe-to-toe the whole time, and then Truex every so often. It was just a phenomenal thing to watch. And then you get to the end, and the best drivers all year not competing for it. And so we've got these manufactured results. And as a race fan, I just sit here and I struggle as a disillusioned race fan. I'm trying to square with myself, how do I continue to watch this sport? And I don't think I'm alone. I think there's a lot of fans in the boat with me. And some of my friends have switched to the entertainment mentality. You just have to treat it with entertainment mentality. And I think that's easier for some than others. I have a hard time, obviously, by this podcast, by this, I don't know, dialogue. We're not going to call it a podcast yet because I don't have a theme. I don't have a title or anything. Just my personal feelings as a race fan of 30 plus years. I have a hard time accepting that integrity doesn't matter, consistency doesn't matter, that skill in a lot of ways doesn't matter because we're not able to showcase the greatness of Kyle Busch. You know, you put, and you know, you can say, well, Kyle Busch is washed up if you want to, but if you look at his resume, there's no way that's a truthful thing to say. It's more, we have leveled these cars out so much that who you're with matters more now than ever, team wise. And because I guarantee you, if you put Kyle Busch in a Hendrick car or a Joe Gibbs car, he's already shown he can win. RCR cars are ebbs and flows. They're not at the same strength as a Hendrick car. I really feel like if you took Kyle Busch and put him back, let's say you put him in the Oxbowman seat, he'd go rattle off 6 or 7 wins because he is Kyle Busch. And you look at everything he's done, and I've got a wall of his stuff too. He's another one of those guys like a Jimmy Johnson, a Jeff Gordon, a Tony Stewart that sat in these cars and showed you how great they were because his teammates could be in similar equipment and not get the job done. Brian Vickers couldn't get it done. Dale Jr. in those cars could not get it done while Jimmy Johnson could. Even Jeff Gordon couldn't do what Jimmy Johnson could do, which pains me as a Jeff Gordon fan to see and say. But it just is reality that, that the era we had preceding this one and preceding that with the Gen 6, even the COT and the Gen 4 or the Twisted Sister, you had real talent on display. And that doesn't mean the guys that you have racing today in the next gen aren't talented, but you're not able to showcase it anymore like you were. Rarities like Homestead last week are when you get to see who's really got it. As seen by Blaney, Chase, Larson, Reddick, like the performance they put on at the end was unbelievable. So, but back to last night. I'm of the opinion that 2 wrongs don't make a right. Did Byron's team do anything wrong? Not that we've seen. Do they deserve to be there? No, they don't, because they directly benefited from the actions of the other Chevy teams, which is exactly what happened to Martin Truex in 2013. Martin Truex actually didn't do anything wrong, but he was yanked out of the playoffs, and Jeff Gordon was added for the actions of Clint Boyer and Brian Vickers, and there was some Ford teams, I don't remember which ones. It might have been McDowell's team, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But either way, when you look at all of that in totality, it put in, others have said it, I think Denny said it in his podcast today, that put MWR out of business. And that's not what I want to see happen to, HMS. I don't think they could anyway. They've got so much financial fidelity, that's almost impossible to put Hendrick Motorsports out of business now. Same thing with RCR, etc., because they're, Chevy key tier partners. But there needs to be something done to stop this from happening. In terms of penalties, I'm paramilitary, so I am of the drop the hammer on them, throw the book at them, teach them a lesson. I don't want to see anybody go out of business, but at the same time, the manufacturers are driving this, and it has to stop, or they're going to turn this into F1. And most NASCAR fans, myself included, absolutely hate F1. Like with a big F, U-C-K, F1. We hate it. But it's also the most pure racing we get out there now, oddly enough, so that's even more irritating. Because they can't have contact. If they had contact, I think a lot of NASCAR people would switch to F1, truthfully, because it'd be better racing, it'd be pure racing. But they need to do something. They need to drop penalties on these teams. My opinion is that you should drop a penalty to the amount of roughly 100 points. That would then drop those teams, the 3, the 1, and the 23, so far down in the standings that it would hurt them financially. You don't even have to hit them with a monetary fine. But then on top of it, I would suspend them for the next 2 races. And that would carry forward into the season opener of the Daytona 500. You will come to the track, you will present a car, and then you will sit atop your pit box, but you will not be allowed to race. I'm going to make a point to you, your team owners, and your sponsors that this kind of conduct will not be tolerated. If you do something like that, it will be the last time this ever happens. That much I can promise you. Would it be considered a severe overreaction? More than likely, yes. But would it get the point driven home? Not only are you not racing in the season finale, so what's supposed to be one of the, basically you're not going to be in the two biggest races of the year, because you're not going to have your teams on the grid for the season finale, the final race of the year, which should draw a ton of eyeballs to see who the champion is. You're also not going to have your teams on the grid for the season opener. They're going to be absent. So they're all going to receive last place points. And you get to start in a hole for the following season. That's a severe enough, steep enough penalty that while it sounds ridiculous, and I'm sure people in the comments will say it's ridiculous, most certainly would make an impression on the teams, the team owners, the sponsors. It might even cost them some sponsors, which would suck. Again, I don't want to see anybody fold. But you have to stop this. You have to put it and make it so painful that this doesn't happen anymore. Because this contrived BS that you force the teams and the manufacturers in to get into this situation is destroying the integrity of the sport. And if you don't think so, if you're one of the fans that thinks what's going on is good, I would ask you to go listen to Mark Martin's podcast he started doing. This guy has won, a ton of races across multiple disciplines of the stock car series, widely respected, and he thinks what they've been doing is utter garbage, that it's the wrong way to go, and that he doesn't think he could do it, because that's not how racing should be. And if you're not okay with that, that's okay. How about Tony Stewart? Tony Stewart, in his recent interview with Kevin Harvick, said, his words, that the direction this sport is going is not one he wants to be part of anymore. That's a 3-time series champion, a 2-time Cup owner champion, Hall of Famer, and, pure, genuine racer, saying that the direction the sport is going, it's the perfect time to leave. He doesn't agree with it, and it's not a part of something he wants to be a part of anymore. That's pretty damning. If I'm NASCAR and I've got one of my 3-time series champions out there, and not just any 3-time series champion, because it takes a lot to win the 3 titles that Tony has. He won under the classic system. He was the best. 2 of them under the old point system. The 3rd under the 10-race chase, which still rewarded consistency and excellence across the board. And he went in there without a chance and won those 5 races. It was phenomenal to watch. I was at one of them. And to have him say that, who also then in 2014 fielded, who is probably, truthfully, the only genuine, rightful champion out of this entire 10 years we've had this nonsense, Kevin Harvick's championship win, where the actual best car all year won. I would say Martin Truex is the second out of all those. The rest of them, Joey got hot at the right time in 2018 and again in 2022. Blaney got hot last year at the right time. Kyle Busch came back from injury and put on a show, but many would argue that missing half the season should disqualify him. I don't know where I stand on that, because, if you're able to come back and win 5 wins in a championship, then I think you probably ought to be there. But at the same time, he didn't start all the races, so I can see the argument both ways. Jimmy Johnson certainly was not the best driver of the year. He won his 7th title, not even close. And the system didn't exist when he won his 6th title. It was still the other way. So if you look at all those drivers, other than when Kyle Larson won 10 and got it in, so you've got Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Larson, all had a ton of wins, won the championship. They're really the only 3 genuine champions out of this that's been produced from this system. The rest of them are Mickey Mouse championships. They really are. And you can go ask any racing purist, and they'll probably tell you the same thing. I know quite a few of them as a race fan for 30 plus years, and most of us all agree that it's pretty much nonsense. At first as a fan, you kept hoping, okay, this could be really good. But as it's gone on, you kind of become disillusioned with the entire thing, and you just want it. You kind of root for Team Chaos, honestly, when you see that the best isn't going to come out on top. I kind of agree with Jordan Bianchi and the Team Chaos theory. I really, at this point, the two best outcomes for this race this weekend would be Joey Logano winning it, who hasn't been any better than a 15th average driver all year, managed to win two to get there. Again, when you're in, I applaud their tenacity to do it right. When they let him back in, I told my buddy Blake, they're going to win. You let him back in, that was a mistake. They're going to win one of these races and get locked in. And if he gets there, you're in trouble. Then, the next one, the reason why I want him to win, is because their team is suing NASCAR. And it would just be icing on the cake if Tyler Reddick could win it. He's a good guy. He's won multiple races this season, so he's a deserving, holder of the trophy, I think, overall, if he wins it. But otherwise, as a regular season champion, he hasn't performed. If he didn't have that points bonus, he wouldn't have gotten there. To Homestead the way he has, thankfully for him, he was able to run well enough to get there, and then when it counted, Blaney screwed the pooch at Homestead, let him have the opportunity, and he won. So I think that's about the end of my frustration with that. I'm planning to do a podcast with my buddy next year where just two race fans have no investment in NASCAR whatsoever other than our fandom. Been following the sport for 3 decades. Don't have any ties to it, not part of NASCAR media, don't have any team ownership stuff, obviously. Just a fan who's passionate, who doesn't like to see the direction his sport is going, and really is struggling with what to do about that, whether I continue to be a fan, whether I just turn it off. Do I treat each race as just the race that it is? You got your water there, Millie? All right, well, you're on camera, and now you're famous, so. All right. If you listen to this, appreciate it. Be happy to hear people's opposing views. Again, I'm just a 40-year-old hillbilly, raised by hillbillies, who, blue collar family guy who loved this sport, and really is disenchanted with kind of where it's going. So we'll see if we have any luck getting anybody to listen to this next year when we put together a show and kind of how we're going to talk about it. But until then, those are my thoughts. Have a good day.